Both China and Vietnam are on high alert as Typhoon Haiyan continues to batter the Philippines. The storm is expected to clear the country on Saturday before heading out across the South China Sea. 3 people are known to have died in the Philippines, but officials expect that number to rise significantly. Around 12 million people are said to be in Haiyan's path, and hundreds of thousands of people have already abandoned their homes to seek safety. Sean Hassett reports.
When Typhoon Haiyan made landfall, it was generating winds of around 310 kilometres per hour, putting it up there with the most powerful storms of the past century. The eastern city of Tacloban was one of the first to be hit. Witnesses say sheets of corrugated iron scythed through the air. Houses and other buildings were torn apart, turning the streets into rivers of debris. It's a similar story across much of the east coast, where huge storm surges and waves of 5 metres have already been recorded. Authorities say 12 million people are at risk across the country. Hundreds of thousands in the most vulnerable areas have left their homes in search of safety.
The winds and rains were very strong. That is why we decided to leave our house.
Many of them have ended up in evacuation centres like this one. Hospitals and soldiers are on standby for rescue and relief operations, although fallen trees are blocking roads in many areas, hampering emergency efforts. Schools and offices have been closed in much of the country, while ferry services and local flights have been suspended. The Philippines president has urged his fellow citizens to stay strong.
As always, no storm can bring a united Filipino people to its knees. It's my hope that we all stay safe in the coming days.
Haiyan is a massive 600 kilometres across, a size that can be best appreciated when viewed from space. The typhoon is still sustaining winds of more than 200 kilometres per hour, and that's unlikely to change as it makes its way across the Philippines. While the country's second biggest city, Cebu, is in danger, the capital, Manila, is expected to escape the worst of the winds. In the past 2 years, the country has been hit by dozens of typhoons, killing thousands. Haiyan is already shaping up as the worst one yet.
And while the typhoon's not yet passed over the Philippines completely, authorities are already looking towards the relief effort. David Carden is the head of the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Asia-Pacific. He's commended the government for its preparations ahead of the storm, but he's warning the impact could still be devastating.
While we have to pay tribute to the preparations done by the government of the Philippines, a big effort was made to conduct preemptive evacuations. The government's reporting that more than 130,000 people were evacuated. So, of course, we hope that this has kept the death toll to the minimum.
Typhoons are very common in the Philippines, so how does this compare to previous storms?
Well, this is compared most often to a typhoon called Typhoon Mike, which struck in 1990. It caused complete destruction of more than 200,000 houses and partial destruction of more than 600,000 houses. This typhoon is probably more powerful than that one, so we can expect to have a similar level of destruction. And this is, in fact, higher than the destruction wrought by Typhoon Bopa, which hit southeast Mindanao last year.
As you mentioned, there is a communication blackout in the disaster areas, and now night has fallen. When do you expect further details will be known from those areas?
Well, we have some local staff on the ground and also some of our NGO partners on the ground, as well as of course, partners in the government. We do have some colleagues arriving in the disaster area tomorrow morning by land and by air. The response is hampered by the fact that, of course, airports and seaports, we believe, are damaged. So it is difficult to get relief supplies in. We understand that some of the airports has been damaged to the radar, so that's also going to affect the ability of flights will only be able to come in during the day. So there will certainly be significant logistical challenges. In these situations, of course, we can expect, and we know already that there have been, as you say, power blackouts. We have heard reports of storm surges to as high as the second story of houses. We've heard, we've seen and heard reports of, fallen trees, blocked roads, damaged bridges. So I think these are all challenges that will be facing the relief operation.
And in terms of the humanitarian response that you've mentioned there, when is it likely that it's even going to be possible to deliver any assistance to those affected? Assessments beginning early Saturday morning, as you mentioned, but when is it likely they'll see any help?
The government of the Philippines has pre-positioned food, and the government, as well as other aid agencies, have pre-positioned some supplies in the area. However, there is a shortage of shelter and other essential items. So, of course, we'll be looking to get this support into the country as soon as we can, and indeed as soon as the government of the Philippines accepts the offer of international assistance. And this, of course, depends on the extent of the assessed needs. But as I said, we do expect them to be extensive, and I think, we expect there to be needs in terms of shelter. There will be water needs, I think sanitation needs. There will be many people whose houses have been destroyed, so they'll be living in evacuation centres. There'll be some probably expected support in camp management, and of course logistics. There are going to be logistical challenges in terms of delivering relief, as I outlined earlier, so that's also something we need to consider. I think health is another area too where support will be needed.
David Carden, head of the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Asia Pacific. Meanwhile, rescue efforts are continuing in the Pacific in the aftermath of the typhoon. Medical and food supplies have been delivered to the worst affected areas in Palau and the Federated States of Micronesia, while the governments evacuated the entire population on the Palauan island of Kyangal. Its 69 residents were left without shelter, clean water and food after the eye of the storm passed directly over their island before reaching the Philippines.
It was totally devastated. All of the houses in Kyangal were torn apart by the wind. When we approached on the helicopter, the whole island was devastated, and I had the goosebumps on the aircraft trying to think that there's a lot of dead people laying down there. Fortunately, when we arrived, the first report that the citizens gave was that there was no injury. There's a lot of fallen trees and coconuts all over the place. There's no power now, and all the communications are down, so there's no communication between them and Coro.